Hello, welcome again to FAIRtax Power Radio. I'm Bob Paxton,
Bob Scarborough.
and we are
Well,
the FAIRtax Guys.
flying through the air with the
Well,
scroll.
yep, you're scrolling better, and I have been meaning to ask. I haven't found out yet what the stock is situation is with those items, the scrolling banners being stocked at the FairtaxStore.org. We were told, a couple of months ago that the supply was running low, and they could not find a supplier to make new ones that would do so in a reasonable quantity at a reasonable rate. So they were saying once those are gone, they're gone. But see, I don't know. We do need to get that fixed out so folks can get one. FairtaxStore.org. There's some new stuff there actually. Mike Simmons has designed a graphic which was kind of tying the fair tax and the 250th birthday celebration together. And you can order a T-shirt. I don't know if you can do mugs or whatever, but there are some things you can get with a FairTax 250 logo on them now, which is kind of cool.
Wouldn't that be wonderful to pass the fair tax in the what is it called? The semi-quincentennial? I think
Oh,
that's
shit. That's a word you need a wheelbarrow to carry it around in. But I'm not sure what that is. I'm not even going to try it. But we just say 250th birthday. That works a lot easier.
that's exactly.
Now you've conjured up a thirst here. I got to get my can of chili. There we go. All
All
right.
right,
Well,
it was from North Carolina.
let's get going here on FairTax Power Radio as we normally do every week when we don't have a guest. It is time to dig into Congress.gov and see what the Congress critters are up to, trying to mess with the tax code again. And again, what we do, we put the words Internal Revenue Code in quotes in the search bar at the top of the Congress.gov page. Be sure you selected only current legislation or legislation in the current Congress. Where's my? There it is. I was looking for my notes. And when you do that, as of the day we're recording this, 1,945, almost 2,000 hits when you return a search looking for stuff with legislation in the current Congress that refers to the Internal Revenue Code. That's a staggering number. It really is. But let's get cranking here to start with. And the first item up for bids is from Representative Michelle Fischbach, Fischbach of Minnesota. It's H.R. 8137 to amend the Internal Revenue Code to establish, would you believe it, more tax credits. Let's establish a tax credit for the production of an investment in, would you believe, certain renewable materials.
Not all, certain.
Yeah, to amend the Internal Revenue Code to establish tax credits for the production of and investment in certain renewable. I've got a feeling that the Congress critters feel if there wasn't, an incentive in the tax code to do things, nothing would ever get done.
Not at
You,
all.
you, you ever get that same idea?
I'm looking at it. I'm looking at this one here and I'm going, okay, she has two co-sponsors, but what's going on in Minnesota that requires, tax credits?
For
Certain
the production of, I hope they're not referring. I won't say that. Given the trouble Minnesota has had with certain scandalous activities up there in recent weeks, but hope they're not considering those people to be renewable resources you get a tax credit for. It wouldn't surprise me that the stuff in the tax code will just curl your hair if you actually look at it. But the Representative Fishbone wants to amend the code to establish tax credits, which means create new ones. It's not that there are enough of them already for the production of an investment in certain renewable materials. Okay, let's
He's
go on.
covering every base there.
Yes. Okay, let's move on. Representative Monica de la Cruz of Texas has put up this next one. This is H.R. 8134. She calls it the Strengthen Taxpayers' Rights Act of 2026. And oh, mercy sakes, I'm looking here at this Congress.gov, and now I'm getting this little page. Verify that you are human. Hang on a second while it decides that I'm not a robot trying to mess the thing up. Okay, now it's letting me in. Strengthen Taxpayer Rights Act of 2026. And it says to amend the Internal Revenue Code to limit the participation of staff of the Internal Revenue Service in conferences being carried out by the Independent Office of Appeals for the purpose of resolving a taxpayer dispute, which raises the question, why do we have a tax system that requires an independent office of appeals and to settle taxpayer disputes? Because when you just pay your taxes at the cash register when you buy things, there are no disputes. There are no independent offices of appeals necessary. We replace a whole lot of complexity and confusion with utter simplicity and fairness when you get rid of the income tax and replace it with the fair tax. Good grief, what's going on here?
I thought the Strengthened Taxpayer Rights Act would have been something like you have a right to be taxed. That was going to be the taxpayer rights.
Oh, mercy. But yeah, why do we have a tax system where there could be disputes at all? When you just pay the tax as part of the price of the things you buy, you have an ultimately simple system. You don't need to go through all this rigmarole. You don't need all these hoops. You don't need this representation before some special commission or some special court to resolve tax disputes. How many times have you ever seen a tax dispute involving a sales tax? I never have.
Never. I mean, you bought it, it's yours, and you get the receipt and the fair tax is right there printed out. You see exactly how much it is. It's visible. It's not hidden in the product's cost.
So, Representative De La Cruz, if you really want to give taxpayers rights, just get rid of the tax that is causing them all these issues and get behind HR 25, the fair tax. That would work really nice. Got another one here. This is from Utah, Representative Blake Moore, Utah 1. This is called the SHARE, SHARE, the SHARE Act, HR 8116 is the name of this one. And you get into that and you find out that this is a bill to amend the Internal Revenue Code to exclude from gross income certain proceeds of shared appreciation mortgage contract. How can you have a tax code without that?
It looks like they're trying to fill up the tax code with just about everything imaginable, and then some things that we've never even thought of, like this.
Well, there's got to be a lobbyist behind this one. You know, mortgage contracts are a big business, and so you've amended the Internal Revenue Code to exclude from gross income. Means you can get this tax-free. Certain proceeds of shared appreciation mortgage contracts. You can see a lobbyist fingerprints all over that one.
Unbelievable.
Unbelievable is correct. Okay, let me scoot on down a little farther and come up with the next item. This is there it is. This is the Mind in America Act. This is, where we go? 113. There it is. Nope, that's the wrong one. This is the End Polluter Welfare for Enhanced Oil Recovery Act. The other one was just next to it, and I didn't see it. But 113, there it is. The End Polluter Welfare for Enhanced Oil Recovery Act. There's a companion bill in the House, H.R. 8108. This is from Senator Jeff Merkley. You may have noticed that there's not as much reflection of my computer screen in my glasses because I've turned my brightness way down so it doesn't reflect, but now I can't read what's out in front of me. So pardon me if I stumble here a little bit. But this is S4222. And I can dig into the text of that. And it says this is a bill to amend the Internal Revenue Code to provide for an end date for the credit for certain qualified carbon oxide and for other purposes. Again, this is the instability of the tax code. You've got a credit for a certain amount of time, and now then they say, all right, let's extend it. And then this next bill comes along and says, oh, let's end it. I mean, they're obviously arguing over how long and whether or not to have all of these expiring provisions in the tax code. Again, totally unnecessary with a fair tax.
I don't.
Oh.
My hope is it just shows how inextricably wound together the lobbyists and our elected officials are in Washington, because a lot of this is not necessarily to be beneficial for, let's say, the constituents of a particular representative in Congress.
Okay, let's move on. One more S from the Senate side, 4221, Ensuring Better Interest Treatment and Deductibility Act. Try saying that fast 3 or 4 times. And this is a bill to amend the Internal Revenue Code to repeal the modification of the definition of adjusted taxable income for purposes of the limitation on business interests. Unpack that one for me, Kimosabe.
Well, I'm still trying to unpack my telephone here to get the details of the bill, but just the name of it is enough to cause scrutiny and people going.
Yeah. To amend the Internal Revenue to repeal the modification. Again, instability. You'll put something in there, then somebody in there, especially when Congress flips from one party to the other, you get all kinds of bills trying to undo what the previous Congress did to repeal stuff or put stuff back. But this one wants to repeal the modification of the definition of adjusted taxable income. They want to monkey with a definition within the tax code for the purposes of the limitation on business interest. Why do we have such a complex and this is making my lungs close up. Why do we have such a complex and indecipherable tax code with all this garbage in it? That just does not make sense.
What can you do? You just have to get representatives out there and talk to them about voting for the fair tax.
Absolutely. All right. That's our Congress.gov segment. Again, Internal Revenue Code in quotes in the search bar. Hit go and look for legislation in the current Congress and see what we're up to. Because they get away from this stuff because we're the only people watching them. I think nobody knows what they're doing. They do stuff in secret up there. They bury provisions in the tax code. Well, it doesn't affect me, so I don't care. So it's crazy.
It's nutty. It's nutty.
All right, cheer one time again. Hang on.
Challenge for a lot of elected officials is, once you get on that treadmill up there, you have a certain number of months that you can spend on taking care of your constituents, a certain number of months in the cycle to raise money to get reelected.
Yeah, they're always raising money to get reelected, so that's okay. Let's move on here. I get advance copies of the chairman's report. It's a weekly article that our Americans for Fair Taxation president Steve Hayes writes. Most of them, in fact, the great majority of them are really brilliant, dealing with subjects that people really need to know about. But every now and then one comes along that I think deserves just a little more publicity. I want to talk about this one. This is a chairman's report that Steve Hayes wrote. It was published on April 17th. These things come out every Friday. You can go to fairtax.org and sign up to have these things delivered directly to your inbox if you want to, or you can just go to fairtax.org and look in the chairman's report archives. But this is an article that Steve published on April 17th. And he called it, I think this will really get your attention. You remember the phrase, lipstick on a pig.
That's right. I love the great.
Yeah, and if you look at the website there and look up this article, he's got a picture of a guy in a business suit kneeling down and literally putting lipstick on a pig, which is wearing a little jacket that says income tax.
Yeah,
that's pretty cool. But this is what Steve was talking about. There are 2 senators. There's Chris Van Hollen from Maryland and Cory Booker from New Jersey, both of whom have introduced new tax plans that would cut income taxes for lower and middle income taxpayers and raise them for the highest income taxpayers and corporations. And I had Grok look up a little information on these things as well. Senator Van Hollen's bill is called the Working Americans Tax Cut Act. It's S4083, introduced on March 12th, 2026. Cory Booker's act is the Keep Your Pay Act of 2026, S4042. But Senator Booker, if you want people to keep their pay, get rid of with income tax. Quit withholding taxes from them. Quit withholding your tax liability. Quit withholding the payroll taxes from them. Let people keep their pay by getting rid of the income tax is the way you do that. But uh, we took a little closer look at what these two bills want to do and how it would be so much better if they just did it with the fair tax. So let me start with Senator Van Hollen's plan. Now, this is all data from analysis prepared by the Tax Foundation. The Tax Foundation said that Senator Van Hollen's plan would slightly reduce federal tax revenue. It would lose $86 billion over the 10-year budget window on a conventional basis. And taxpayers in the middle quintile would see the largest increase in after-tax income. Their after-tax income would go up by 3.9%, while taxpayers at the top 1%, the evil 1%, they would see a loss of 9.7% in their income. So again, that's always let's go after the guys up at the top because they got a lot of money and there's not a whole lot of them. They can't vote in a big enough block to stop us from doing this. So this is what the Senator Van Hollen wants to do. Sets an exemption equal to $46,000 for single filers, $92,000 for joint filers. It would define qualifying taxpayers as those with income of 175% or less of the exemption. They would calculate their ordinary tax liability and then calculate their tax liability again. More complexity and hoops to jump through under a 22.5% tax with a cost of living exemption and pay the lesser amount of those two calculations. And to finance this tax cut, the plan would impose a new surtax on high income taxpayers. That will be 5% on incomes above $1 million or $1.5 million for joint filers. That goes up to 10% above $2 million or $3 million for joint filers, and all the way up to 12% above $5 million or $7.5 million for joint filers. So we're going to put a new surtax on these people already to pay for the cuts that we're going to give to the middle, and the maximum tax exemption of the surtax thresholds would be adjusted for inflation. Isn't that just a wonderful way to tinker with the tax code? People do this and they say, we're making sweeping changes and vast reform to the tax system. And I keep being reminded of what Kerry Bowers once said about the Tax Cuts and Jobs Act. You remember that? He said the Tax Cuts and Jobs Act took a system based on individual and corporate income taxes administered and enforced by the Internal Revenue Service and made a sweeping reform and transformed all that into a system of individual and corporate income taxes administered and enforced by the Internal Revenue Service. Crazy what these guys do and call tax reform, and it's really not. They're just tinkering with the current system. Real tax reform would involve pulling the entire corrupt system out by the roots and replacing it with the fair tax. Okay, it's your turn to talk. I'm out of breath.
Well, the other plan introduced by Senator Booker would significantly reduce federal tax revenue, losing up to $6.7 trillion over the 10-year budget window on a conventional basis without accounting for the unspecified business tax increases. The senators bill does the following. It increases the standard deduction to $37,500 for single filers, $75,000 for joint filers, and $56,250 the standard deduction for head of household filers. It would expand refundable tax credits by increasing the child tax credit to $4,320 for children under 6, that's per child, and $3,600 for children ages 6 to 17, while providing an additional $2,400 bonus in the year a child is born, making it fully refundable.
Don't you just love that? When your tax credit exceeds your tax liability, they refund you the difference. That's what a refundable tax credit is all about. It's just a way to hand people money.
Exactly. And beyond that, it just further complicates an already complicated tax system that we would be better off spending time doing anything else. A root canal, a frontal lobotomy, you name it, brain surgery, instead of dealing with taxes. income taxes specifically. And, a lot of the arguments come down to, you know, how do you jump from one to the other? And I think that's where we are. But here are two plans uh, that basically do nothing to help untangle the mess that is our income tax code.
Yeah, because the Senator Booker's bill further messes with that child tax credit amounts. Go ahead and elaborate on that if you would.
Well, those expanded CTC, child tax credit amounts, would begin phasing down to the current law amounts at $150,000 for joint filers and $112,500 for single filers. The child tax credit values would be inflation adjusted, which in a lot of cases makes sense. The earned income tax credit would triple for workers without qualifying children by increasing the phase-in rate to 15.3% and slightly expanding the income thresholds. The age range for the credit would expand to cover those aged 19 to 24 and then over 65.
How are they going to pay for all that?
Well, of course, it's all numbers, and it just gets you further down the road to complexity. And then somebody in 5 years will go, well, we need to adjust this. And all of a sudden, you've got a whole new group of people with their eyeballs on this, and they begin to modify. The rules to fit today or whatever is taking place currently.
Yeah,
So
well, this bill is going to try to offset the cost of that expanded standard deduction by raising the tax rate on the top two brackets that go from 35% to 37, and then the top one would go from 41 to 43%. And again, that's just going to encourage more people to find a way around this stuff, hide income, send it offshore. And there are millions and millions of ways to mess with the tax code, both within the law and without the law. And this just doesn't work. We have seen it over and over and over again. But Booker has also announced, but not specified exactly what they're going to be, additional tax increases, including increasing the corporate income tax rate. Oh, mercy. He wants to raise prices for everything everybody buys. That's what happens when you increase the corporate income tax rate. You want to increase the stock buyback excise tax rate. And that's crazy. Absolutely nuts. Said some lower and middle income people might benefit through lower marginal tax rates under both plans, but the taxpayers would face worse incentives through higher marginal tax rates on the net. This is the Tax Foundation talking. We expect both plans would reduce long-run GDP. Why do they keep doing that? Why do we keep letting them get away with it?
I think it has a lot to do with the at least showing we're checking in with our constituents to show them that we are indeed working on tax issues. Whether or not they bear fruit is yet to be determined for both of these tax cut plans that are in effect. But people like to hear about tax cuts now. We love to hear about the tax cuts.
Oh, mercy. Well, it says that IRS data for tax year 2022 shows U.S. federal income tax system continues to be fairly progressive as high income taxpayers pay the highest average income tax rates. That will continue under the fair tax because the prebate is going to untax spending up to the poverty level. And if you don't spend much above the poverty level, you take very little out of your own pocket pay the fair tax. If you are filling up your Gulfstream jet with jet fuel, especially at today's prices, you will pay a lot of fair tax on that. So it's the fair tax will continue to be a progressive one, and I don't mean that as a political ideology. That just defines a tax system which is based on people's ability to pay. That will, if you got more, that will take you'll pay more. And again, the top 50% of all taxpayers paid 97% of all federal income taxes. The bottom 50% paid 3%. That's under the current system. But both of these plans, Senator Van Hollen and Senator Booker, both of these plans will increase U.S. debt. And here's what neither plan even begins to address. Neither plan begins to address the problem with income tax evasion, over $1 trillion a year, None of them address the negative impact of the income tax on our exporters and the subsidy it gives importers who compete against U.S. products. They don't realize that consumption-based taxes increase GDP growth more than income-based taxes. Again, the Tax Foundation says both of these things will suppress GDP growth, push it in the other direction, and neither one fixes the problems with Social Security like the fair tax does.
That's a big concern, and a lot. It's talking about kicking something down the line. The dealing with Social Security and Medicare are two of the biggest challenges facing the United States of America going forward as the population ages and there are less people in the workforce that are contributing into those coffers.
Yeah, last week, if we were in our Congress.gov segment, we referred to S4196. That's another bill from Senator Van Hollen. And that one is specifically direct estate and gift tax revenue directly into Social Security. That's his answer for solving it. We'll just channel all the estate and gift tax in. Fair tax gets rid of all that stuff and makes everyone whose spending rises above the poverty level a contributor to Social Security and Medicare. Right now, only people who are working for a paycheck contribute to the system, and that gets capped at a certain level. So if you make more than a particular level, you stop contributing to the system. You could not have designed it any worse if you had tried. But again, we're about out of time here on FairTax Power Radio. We have been looking at a chairman's report with particular kudos to Steve Hayes on this one. This is one of your better ones, Steve, comparing how the two senators' tax plans just failed miserably relative to how the fair tax would solve the problem.
Absolutely. And just remember, fairtax.org has timely information on it about the fair tax, how you can participate, volunteer. You can, of course, get the chairman's report on there. And as Bob Paxton said a minute ago, sign up for the updates. You get alert and news about fair tax initiatives and some information maybe from in your area. Very simple. Go out and do that.
All right. Well, Steve, thank you for letting us borrow your work here on FairTax Power Radio. And when you write a super good one like this, we're just going to have to highlight it a bit. But that's going to wrap up this edition of FairTax Power Radio. Thank you so much for watching, listening, and especially sharing the videos to your social media. That helps us a great deal. And that's going to wrap it up, as we said. And we will see you again, same time, same channel next week on FairTax Power Radio. Until we meet again, I'm Bob Paxton.
Bob Scarborough.
We are the FairTax Guys, reminding you the fair tax is the only truly fair tax. And once you understand it,
you'll demand it.
So, how much will I bring home?
Go ahead.
How much do you make? We'll just say 40,000, okay? Keep it simple, throw out the deductions, all that stuff. So, you got your 40K, right? Now the first 8,000 is going to be taxed at 10%. The 8 to 33,000 is going to be taxed at 15%. And the 33 to 40, of course, is 25%. So that brings your total to $6,345.
Okay, so the average is what?
16%. Okay, and on top of that, you got Medicare, which is 1.5%, and then of course your Social Security, which is 6.2%. So actually, your new total is $9,405.
Which is
23.65%. You're getting it. You're getting it. Don't even get me started on what the boss has to pay. He's got to pay a portion of your taxes as well, so you don't have to.
Right. And you?
Oh, you'd bring home every penny.